Is it possible for a camera to be both gratuitous and communicative? I'd like to say Fate has that part down. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. I'm really excited for this video, since it involves addressing the amazing Babylonia anime. The topic for today was inspired by Anifem, who reviewed the first episode by stating, "No Fate series is going to win any feminism awards. It has some good female characters, but also some serious issues as well, especially in the character design department. Fate characters are some of my favorite in the entire world, but it's not like they're the only ones to think FGO has some questionable designs." But then they go on to say this. Mash seems okay too, but the animation around her really highlights one of the main issues with the franchise's presentation of women, by which I mean there's a ton of highly detailed, glossy shots of her nethers in tight shorts. In that same article, they show one of the popular screen caps from episode 1 with a caption stating, "I'm sure there was just no other possible way they could have framed this." While they don't specifically address it in this particular review, it's obvious Anifem is making a reference to the male gaze. Thus, I'd like to talk about the male gaze, and how it pertains to FGO's exciting action sequences. The male gaze is a facet of feminist film theory that concerns itself with the framing of women on screen, and how very often that framing is dominated by a male point of view, intent on essentially ogling the characters. It comes in 3 stages. The cameraman or director choosing where to aim the camera, whether that camera represents the perspective of a specific character, and the effect this has on spectators watching the film from the safety of their seats. An example of this would be a male filmmaker creating a story that features a male character, specifically looking at a female. The filmmaker sets it up so we understand that what we're seeing is the eyeline match of the male character upon the female. He's doing the looking, and she's being looked at. Regardless of what the character thinks about what they're seeing, the audience gets to vicariously enjoy the exhibition without penalty. The reason a male gaze is brought up is because it's presumed to be problematic. It supposedly renders men as active agents, and women as passive objects. This ignores their agency, placing all of their worth on the evaluation of onlookers. It forces women to think in terms of how others might see them. Is this pose flattering? Becomes more important then, is this comfortable? Is this what I want? Or am I simply doing this to be accepted? Another potentially harmful criticism is that these moments of exhibition detract from the main narrative, serving no other function than to please onlookers. Modern feminists reference the first Transformers film, and Megan Fox's alluring panning shot in front of LaBeouf's car. The camera isn't focused on what she's doing, but rather the way she looks while doing it. The director frames it so that the viewers are forced to take LaBeouf's perspective, to look at Fox the way his character does. All of this said, I think it's nonsense. Every last bit. Not to give Transformers too much credit for its writing, but this scene does work to further the narrative. One of the main reasons LaBeouf's character wanted a car in the first place was to up his status, to get more popular with the ladies. Thus, his pursuit of women is of narrative significance. And this framing tells us he's found quite a wonderful woman. She seems to know more about the car than him, but in that moment, he's more concerned with how gorgeous she is. Sure, it may be from a male's perspective, and it is focused on how he views Fox's character, but it's a solid characterization of his awe. Just like all the crazy explosions in the film, he is figuratively blown away by this woman. Mind you, this story is about him, but it's not like films only take a male's perspective. The male gaze as criticism had its merits during the classical days of Hollywood cinema, which was plagued with misguided assumptions of gender and an overwhelming presence of both male creators and audiences. The industry's failure to cater to other demographics is an entirely separate issue. Blaming this all on men is just silly. The same phenomenon can, and occasionally does, happen with women gazing upon men, like Go from the anime Free. Her obsession with the guys' muscles arguably has even less narrative significance than the Transformers scene, because she's not even the main character. Her moments of objectifying the guys serve only to frame the anime's fetish for glorified athletic bodies. And yet, you wouldn't criticize Free of denying its male characters their agency. The boys, their relationships, feelings, dreams, and ambitions are all front and center, while Go simply basks in the side effect of those ambitions happening to be quite spectacular. Therefore, I'm going to refer to the male gaze in this video by what I consider to be a more appropriate term, the sensational gaze. Rather than being this one-sided gender war, I feel creators are simply trying to present elements in the frame as dynamically and excitingly as possible, whether that be a subject's body, their actions, or both. We can see this working to full effect in the Babylonia anime, specifically its fight scenes. The dynamic camera angles may indeed be gratuitous, but in no way do they rob anyone of their agency. Rather, these wild and crazy shots serve to emphasize motion, impact, and drama, complementing these characters in their strength. In a Fate fight, the servants are the spectacle, and we'd expect to see them from every angle, complementing their entire bodies as finely tuned weapons of combat. The only issue I see is that you can frame men from literally any camera angle without it being considered lewd, while women come with all sorts of red tape about where you can or can't look. I applaud Fate for not getting caught up in that web, and instead showing its viewers what needs to be seen in any given moment as dynamically as possible. For instance, just as the camera would show a sword aimed deep into the foreground, foreshortened for an enhanced sense of depth, a character's legs or hips might shimmy from one side to the other as they pivot their weight or momentum between strikes. It would actually be quite insulting to the women, in my opinion, if they weren't given the full intensity of combat, out of fear of upskirt shots and the like. I mean, the camera's gonna go there, that's just a fact of life, but what's important is how these women deal with that exposure. If they're really focused on the combat, why would they care about a little exposure? They've got better things to worry about, like where the enemy's next attack is coming from. Now, you can argue the issue is about clothing, not necessarily because one outfit is more practical than another, but that certain outfits cover up the very regions that might get exposed in combat. This is presumably why they gave Tifa spats for the Final Fantasy VII remake. It's certainly why Chie from Persona 4 wears them. If we really want to see Mashu's groin in battle, why not give her some pants? As valid as this may seem, it's also quite limiting. A woman shouldn't have to dress more conservatively to be taken seriously, out of fear that they might be seen, or because their apparel is distracting. Are you gonna tell me athletes who play beach volleyball need extra leggings or shorts to hide their almighty mound of Venus? Again, it doubles back around to incriminate those who point it out. Are you gonna be so obsessed with someone's privates that you can't acknowledge their athletic performance? Sounds like your problem, not theirs. I'll admit though, these shots could be circumnavigated and still be dynamic. It's not to say that arousal plays no part in them. I'm sure they exist, in part, so that viewers can make tiny GIFs or screen caps of the most exposed frames and angles. But if you enjoy that kind of thing, what does that mean exactly? Are you somehow belittling their combat efforts? Depends on the individual. There's no reason both the carnal satisfaction and intense combat can't complement each other. It's like Spike Spiegel says, "I like a woman who can kick my ass." Turns out, those empowering elements are attractive. So essentially what I'm saying is that the male gaze isn't this language of subjugating women for men's pleasure. Literally anyone can enjoy or create it, and for every part that's meant to be arousing, it's also just as dynamic and empowering. You should cheer for these fights, both as fights and as the glory of the human body in motion. That said, if you think these women aren't getting the respectful fights they deserve, then let me know in the comments. If you actually agree with me though, tell me which fight in Babylonia you like the most so far. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and most of all, smashing that notification bell as if it were your waifu. That way you'll never miss out on all of my anime content, lore videos, live streams, and Holy Waifu Wars polls. My vids are struggling to get featured, so that bell is absolutely critical. If you want to support me directly, check out my Patreon, or consider donating via Super Chat. And as always, celebrate your fandom.